During the summer of 2003, I found myself backpacking across Europe, a journey I had dreamt of since my teenage years. Now, at 25 and recently graduated from college, I was eager to explore the world beyond my small hometown in Ohio. My travels were a mix of awe-inspiring sights and the exhilarating freedom that comes from discovering new cultures. But it was in a quaint village nestled in the French countryside where my adventure took a harrowing turn, transforming my dream trip into a chilling memory that haunts me to this day. The village, with its cobblestone streets and vine-covered stone houses, seemed to have leaped straight out of a fairy tale. I, a young woman with an insatiable wanderlust, was captivated. I checked into a small family-run inn, planning to spend a few days exploring the surrounding countryside. The innkeeper, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile, recommended a nearby trail that offered stunning views of the valley. She mentioned that not many tourists knew about it, which piqued my interest further. The next morning, equipped with a map and a camera, I set out on the trail. The path wound through fields of lavender and past ancient stone ruins, offering breathtaking vistas as promised. I lost track of time, enraptured by the beauty and solitude. It was late afternoon when I realized I had wandered far from the main trail, with no other hikers in sight. As I tried to retrace my steps, I noticed someone following me at a distance. At first, I thought it was another hiker, but the sinking feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I quickened my pace, but so did my follower. Panic began to set in. The trail, once a source of joy, now felt like a maze designed to trap me. I remembered the innkeeper's words about the trail being relatively unknown, and it dawned on me that this might not have been an innocent recommendation. With my heart pounding, I broke into a run, desperately searching for any sign of the main path or other people. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, I stumbled upon a small clearing and, to my relief, another hiker. I mustered what little French I knew to explain my situation. The hiker, a man in his late 30s, listened intently, and then offered to escort me back to the village. His calm demeanor and assurance that we were not far from the village eased my panic. We walked in silence, the comforting presence of another person making the dense woods seem less menacing. However, as we neared the village, a chilling realization struck me. The route we were taking was not the same one I had followed that morning. Before I could process this fully, he turned to me, his once kind eyes now cold and calculating, and said in perfect English, "You should have been more careful about trusting strangers." Fear gripped me, but survival instinct took over. I pushed him with all my might, taking advantage of his momentary surprise to sprint towards the village. I didn't stop running until I reached the inn, bursting through the door in a state of near hysteria. The innkeeper was the first to reach me, her expression turning from concern to horror as I recounted my ordeal. The police were called, and an investigation was launched. But the man was never found, nor was any link established between him and the innkeeper, who was genuinely shocked and distressed by the incident. I left the village the next day, my sense of adventure overshadowed by a newfound wariness. The remainder of my trip was spent in more populated areas, the haunting experience in the French countryside, a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of idyllic settings. To this day, I wonder what might have happened had I not escaped. That summer adventure, meant to be a celebration of freedom and discovery, taught me a valuable, albeit terrifying, lesson about the shadows that can hide in the most beautiful of places. In the autumn of 2015, I was living in a sleepy suburb outside of Portland, Oregon. I was a 28-year-old freelance writer, enjoying the freedom and challenges that came with my chosen profession. My life was ordinary, peaceful even, surrounded by the lush greenery and the calming rain that characterizes the Pacific Northwest. However, that tranquility was shattered one October evening, turning my serene life into the backdrop for a real-life horror story. I had just returned from a coffee shop where I spent most of my days writing and people-watching. My small two-bedroom house, which I shared with my cat Loki, felt especially welcoming as the days grew shorter and the nights colder. That evening, as I sat down to work on my latest project, I noticed Loki acting strangely, his gaze fixed on the hallway leading to the bedrooms, his body tense and alert. I brushed it off as one of his many quirks and focused on my work. It wasn't until I decided to call it a night that I felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. The hallway Loki had been fixated on earlier seemed darker than usual, the shadows deeper. A chill ran down my spine, but I attributed it to my overactive imagination, fueled by the horror stories I often wrote. I went to bed but found sleep elusive. Loki refused to leave my side, his ears perked up, listening to sounds I couldn't hear. Then, it happened. A faint scraping sound, like metal against wood, coming from the living room. My heart raced as I debated whether to investigate or call the police. Deciding that I couldn't let fear paralyze me, I grabbed the baseball bat I kept for protection and tiptoed out of my room. The house was dark, the only light coming from the moon casting shadows through the windows. The scraping sound continued, now accompanied by a soft thudding, rhythmic and deliberate. As I edged closer to the living room, the noises ceased abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to wick down the air itself. I flicked on the light, bracing myself for the worst, but the room was empty. Relief washed over me, followed by confusion. Had I imagined the whole thing? Just as I was about to turn back, a draft of cold air made me shiver, and I noticed the back door slightly ajar, a door I was certain I had locked. Panic surged through me as I realized someone had been in my house. I checked every room, every closet, under every bed, but found nothing. The police arrived quickly, but their search turned up empty as well. They suggested it might have been an attempted burglary, the intruder scared off by my presence. I didn't sleep that night, nor many nights after. Loki became my constant shadow, always on alert. I installed security cameras, changed the locks, and did everything I could to feel safe again. But the sense of violation lingered. Weeks passed without incident, and life slowly returned to normal. Or, so I thought. It was a small detail, easily overlooked, that shattered any illusion of safety. My laptop, which I always left on my desk in the living room, was slightly out of place, the cursor blinking on a document I didn't recognize. It was a message, typed in a chilling, succinct sentence that read, "I enjoyed watching you." I moved out of that house within a week, leaving behind the suburb and its shadowed memories for the bustle of downtown Portland. But the fear followed me, a constant reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not the ones we write about, but those that walk among us, unseen, waiting in the shadows of our own homes. It was the summer of 2010, and I had just turned 22. I was a recent college graduate with a degree in computer science, full of optimism and ready to take on the world. To celebrate this new chapter in my life, I decided to embark on a solo road trip across the United States. I had always been fascinated by the vast, diverse landscapes and the myriad cultures that my country offered. As a young man with an adventurous spirit, I saw this trip as the ultimate freedom. My journey began in the bustling city of New York, where I lived. Equipped with a map, a backpack, and my trusty old car, I set out west, eager to explore the unknown. The trip was everything I had hoped for and more. I witnessed the majestic beauty of the Grand Canyon, the serene vastness of the Great Plains, and the vibrant cultures of various small towns and cities. After several weeks of traveling, I found myself in a remote part of Nevada. The desert landscape was both awe-inspiring and intimidating in its emptiness. It was here, in the middle of nowhere, that my adventure took a terrifying turn. I had been driving for hours under the scorching sun when my car suddenly sputtered and died. Stranded with no cell service in the nearest town miles away, I realized the gravity of my situation. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a sense of vulnerability washed over me. As darkness enveloped the desert, the temperature dropped. I decided to spend the night in my car, hoping to flag down a passing vehicle in the morning. However, sleep eluded me. The silence of the desert was oppressive, and the occasional howl of a distant coyote did little to ease my nerves. It was well past midnight when I saw the headlights. Relief flooded through me as I watched the car approach. It slowed down, and a man in his late 40s stepped out. He offered to help, claiming to live nearby and have a tow truck that could pull my car. Desperate and without options, I accepted his offer, not realizing the mistake I was making. We drove in silence to his home, which turned out to be a dilapidated trailer in an even more isolated part of the desert. The place was littered with car parts, old furniture, and other debris. It was then that I noticed the absence of a tow truck, and the uneasy feeling in my stomach grew into full-blown panic. The man became increasingly aggressive, insisting that I come inside for food and water. His demeanor had shifted from helpful to menacing, and it was clear that his intentions were not benign. I needed to escape, but the vast, open desert offered nowhere to hide. In a moment of sheer desperation, I feigned gratitude and suggested we celebrate with a drink from my car, where I had a bottle of whiskey. As he turned his back to me to lead the way, I seized the moment, sprinting into the darkness of the desert, not daring to look back. I ran for what felt like miles, my heart pounding in my chest until I saw the faint lights of a highway in the distance. I didn't stop running until I reached the road, where I was eventually picked up by a passing truck driver who took me to the nearest town. The police were notified, but the man and his trailer were never found. It was as if he had vanished into the desert air, leaving me with nothing but a haunting memory and a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk in the most unexpected places. Since then, I've continued to travel, but with a new sense of caution and awareness. The freedom of the open road will always call to me, but I will never forget the night when that freedom almost cost me everything. In the fall of 2018, my life took an unexpected detour into what felt like a prolonged nightmare, one that would forever alter my perception of safety and trust. I was a 30-year-old female living in Seattle, Washington, working as a graphic designer for a small, yet burgeoning tech startup. My life, by most accounts, was ordinary and uneventful, filled with the daily routines of work, occasional outings with friends, and the comfort of my small but cozy apartment, nestled in one of the city's quieter neighborhoods. That autumn, I began receiving anonymous letters. At first, they seemed harmless, a nondescript envelope containing a single piece of paper with a few lines of text, praising my work and expressing admiration. Flattered but cautious, I dismissed them as a benign act of kindness from someone perhaps too shy to reveal their identity. However, as the weeks passed, the letters grew more frequent and intensely personal, detailing not just my professional achievements, but my daily habits, the places I frequented, and even descriptions of what I wore on specific days. The tone of the letters shifted from admiring to obsessive, each new message laced with a possessiveness that sent chills down my spine. I reported the letters to the police, but without any direct threats or evidence of who was sending them. Their hands were tied. I felt exposed and vulnerable, my every move seemingly watched by unseen eyes. Determined not to let fear dictate my life, I took precautions, changing my routines, being more vigilant of my surroundings, and installing a security system in my apartment. Despite these measures, the letters kept coming, each one more disturbing than the last. It was clear that my observer not only knew my routines, but was intricately aware of my attempts to evade them. One evening, returning home from a late night at work, I found yet another letter slid under my door. This one, unlike the others, contained a photo of me taken from a distance, with a note, "I see you've been trying to hide from me. It won't work." Panic surged through me. It was one thing to be watched, but the physical evidence of someone lurking so close pushed me over the edge. Sleep became elusive, every noise a potential threat. I felt trapped in my own home, a prisoner to an unknown stalker whose motivations were as unclear as their identity. The police, now with something more concrete to go on, increased patrols in my neighborhood, but the damage to my psyche was done. The breakthrough came on a night I'll never forget. I was working late again, the office almost empty, save for a few night owls like myself. Taking a break, I headed to the communal kitchen to make coffee. That's when I noticed him, a colleague from another department, someone I'd spoken to in passing but never really known, standing outside, just staring at the building. Our eyes met through the glass, and in that instant, I knew. The police were called, and my colleague was arrested. Hidden in his apartment were hundreds of photos of me, along with detailed notes on my daily routines. He confessed to everything, claiming his obsession had started with a chance encounter and spiraled out of control from there. In the aftermath, I struggled to reclaim my sense of normalcy. I took a leave of absence from work, sought therapy, and eventually moved to a new city to start fresh. The experience taught me the terrifying reality that sometimes the greatest threats come not from strangers lurking in the shadows, but from those hidden in plain sight, their obsessions cloaked in the guise of ordinary interaction. To this day, I remain vigilant, a part of me forever looking over my shoulder, a stark reminder that the line between admiration and obsession is frighteningly thin. In the spring of 2014, I was in the midst of navigating the chaotic beauty of my early 20s. I was a 24-year-old man, fresh out of graduate school, and embarking on my first real job in the bustling city of Chicago. The city's towering skyscrapers and endless energy were a far cry from the quiet rural town in Michigan where I'd grown up. I was eager for adventure, ready to carve out my place in the world, and completely unaware of how quickly that world could turn dark. I had found a modest apartment in a decent part of the city, not too far from where I worked as a data analyst for a marketing firm. The job was demanding, often requiring me to stay late into the evening to meet deadlines or prepare for presentations. It was during one of these late nights that I first encountered him, Thomas, a security guard in my building. Thomas seemed friendly enough at first, offering a nod or a simple good evening as I passed through the lobby. Over time, these interactions grew into brief conversations about the weather, sports, or the news. It was nice to have a familiar face in the city where I knew so few people, or so I thought. As weeks turned into months, I began to notice odd occurrences. I would often find Thomas near my car in the parking garage, claiming he was just doing his rounds. Then there were the unexplained disruptions at my apartment, mail that seemed to have been tampered with, a feeling of disarray within my neatly kept living space, and once, a photograph of me that I had never taken, left on my doorstep. I tried to rationalize these incidents as coincidences or the result of my own forgetfulness. However, the uneasy feeling in my gut refused to subside. It wasn't until I received a text message from an unknown number, a message that detailed what I had eaten for dinner and the movie I had watched alone in my apartment the night before, that I could no longer deny the truth. Someone was watching me, and I had a sinking feeling it was Thomas. Fear gripped me, a kind of fear I had never known. It was invasive, the idea that someone could know so much about my private life, that my sanctuary had been violated. I reported my suspicions to the building management and the police, but without concrete evidence, there was little they could do. Determined to take matters into my own hands, I set up a small security camera in my apartment. What it captured confirmed my worst fears. Thomas had made copies of my keys and was entering my apartment at will, rifling through my belongings and observing my most private moments. The footage was enough for the police to take action. Thomas was arrested and charged with several counts of breaking and entering, as well as stalking. It turned out that I wasn't his first victim, but thankfully, I was the last. The aftermath of those events left me shaken, my sense of security shattered. I moved to a new apartment, invested in an advanced security system, and became much more guarded with the people I allowed into my life. The experience taught me the hard way that danger doesn't always come in the form you expect. Sometimes, it wears a friendly face, offering a smile as it invades your life, one seemingly innocent interaction at a time. To this day, I'm more cautious, always aware of my surroundings and the people in it. The memory of Thomas and the violation of my privacy lingers, a haunting reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones hiding in plain sight, masquerading as part of our everyday lives. In the summer of 2016, my world was flipped upside down, not by ghosts or ghouls, but by something far more terrifying: human malice. I was a 26-year-old female living in a small, seemingly safe suburb outside of Austin, Texas. Having recently landed a job as a junior architect, I was excited to start this new chapter of my life, blissfully unaware of the darkness that lurked in the most mundane of places. My routine was simple and predictable. I would leave my cozy one-bedroom apartment early in the morning and return in the evening, tired but fulfilled from a day's work. I cherished my independence and the quiet comfort of my home, a place where I could unwind and be myself without reservation. However, that sense of security was shattered when I started noticing signs that someone had been in my apartment during my absence. It was subtle at first: a chair slightly out of place, a window left ajar, things I could easily dismiss as forgetfulness on my part. But then, it became impossible to ignore. I found a note on my bedside table, written in a hurried scrawl. "I love watching you sleep." Chills ran down my spine as I read those words, my mind racing with fear and confusion. How long had this been going on? Who was doing this, and why? I reported the incident to the police, but without any evidence of forced entry or a clear suspect. There was little they could do. They suggested changing the locks and being more vigilant about security, which I promptly did. but the damage was done. I no longer felt safe in my own home. The notes continued, each one more invasive and disturbing than the last. They detailed not just my routines, but my interactions with friends and colleagues, revealing a level of surveillance that was deeply unsettling. I was being stalked by someone who seemed to know my every move, someone who took pleasure in invading my privacy and sowing fear into my daily life. Determined to take back control, I installed security cameras inside my apartment. What I discovered was more horrifying than I had imagined. The footage revealed the identity of my stalker, my neighbor from 2 doors down, a man I had spoken to on several occasions, exchanged pleasantries with in the hallway. He had been picking my lock and entering my apartment while I was at work, leaving behind those terrifying notes as a twisted token of his obsession. Armed with evidence, the police arrested him. He confessed to everything, explaining that his fascination with me had grown into an obsession he couldn't control. He was charged and eventually convicted, but the psychological scars he left behind were not so easily remedied. I moved away shortly after, unable to bear the weight of the memories that clung to every corner of my apartment. The experience taught me the harsh reality that sometimes the monsters we fear are not the creatures of our nightmares, but the people we pass by every day, those who hide their darkness behind a friendly smile. To this day, I struggle with the fear and paranoia that incident instilled in me. I've learned to be more cautious, more suspicious of those around me, a constant reminder that true horror doesn't always come from the supernatural, but often from the person next door. Late fall of 2019 found me restless and seeking adventure, leading me to accept a job as a park ranger in a secluded state park in the Pacific Northwest. At 29, having spent the better part of my life in the hustle and bustle of San Francisco, I yearned for the tranquility of nature and the simplicity of a life surrounded by the rugged beauty of the forests and mountains. I craved solitude, or so I thought, until I found myself engulfed in a situation far more isolating and terrifying than I had ever anticipated. The park was known for its sprawling wilderness, a vast expanse of forests, rivers, and trails that attracted hikers, campers, and nature lovers from all over. My role was to patrol the trails, assist visitors, and ensure the preservation of the park's natural beauty. It was a dream come true, initially. The crisp air, the scent of pine and earth, and the solitude were balm to my soul. However, the serenity of the park was soon overshadowed by a series of unsettling events that began innocuously enough. It started with the reports of missing personal items from campsites, small things like food, utensils, and clothing. I wrote it off as the work of opportunistic wildlife or forgetful campers. But then, the reports became more frequent, and the missing items more peculiar. A sense of unease began to permeate the park, and I could no longer dismiss the incidents as mere coincidences. The situation escalated when a hiker reported finding a makeshift shelter deep within the park, far off any marked trails. It was crudely constructed from branches, tarps, and stolen camping gear. Inside, we discovered a collection of items that left no doubt they were the stolen belongings of our visitors. This discovery was disturbing enough, but what truly sent shivers down my spine were the photographs, dozens of candid shots of campers and hikers taken from a distance, capturing moments of vulnerability. The realization that someone was living in the park, watching and possibly obsessing over its visitors, turned my sanctuary into a hunting ground. The wilderness I loved became a source of paranoia. Every shadow and rustle in the bushes became a potential threat. The isolation I once sought now felt oppressive, a barrier that cut me off from the rest of the world. Determined to protect the park and its visitors, I spearheaded efforts to find the person responsible. For weeks, we searched the park, but the vastness of the wilderness worked in their favor. Whoever they were, they knew the terrain better than we did, and remained elusive, a ghost haunting the depths of the forest. It wasn't until late in the season, as the chill of winter began to set in and the number of visitors dwindled, that we finally caught a break. A trap camera, originally set up to monitor wildlife, captured images of a man, unkempt and wild-eyed, skulking through the underbrush. With this evidence and a renewed effort, we were able to track him down. He was a former park ranger, dismissed years before for erratic behavior and an obsession with the park that had crossed the line into madness. After his dismissal, He had retreated into the park's wilderness, where he lived off the land and the possessions of those who ventured into his domain. The man was arrested and taken into custody, but the shadow he cast over the park lingered long after. The wilderness will always be a part of me, but the innocence of my solitude was lost forever. I learned the hard way that sometimes the most profound dangers in the wild are not the beasts that roam the forests, but the darkness that resides in the heart of man. And there we have it, folks. Our journey through the shadows and into the chilling depths of human nature has come to an end. I hope these tales have sent shivers down your spine, made you glance over your shoulder, or even question the ordinary moments of your daily lives. If you've enjoyed this exploration into the darker side of the human psyche, please don't forget to hit that like button. It helps more than you know. You can always share your thoughts, feelings, or even your own creepy experiences in the comments below. We love hearing from our listeners. And if you're new here or haven't yet joined our Horror Stories family, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our future tales of the macabre and mysterious. Until next time, stay safe, keep the lights on, and remember, the real monsters might be closer than you think.